G'day subscribers and welcome along. Today we're going to jive talk about the FJ Holden Army Ute. You're with Jules Knight on Jive Talk and Garage. So we've all got a Holden, or there's some interest in Holdens, which is why we're, following Jive Talking Garage. But for me, as a kid, I didn't think anything of the Army Ute, or for that matter, any other of the variations like vehicles for the Air Force, the Navy, the PMG, the Department of Works, for even the Snowy Mountains Hydro Scheme for that matter. So all of those things paled in significance for me until 1982 when I was with my buddies on the way back from Sydney, and we bumped into, on the side of the road, a poor old FX Ute, or a 48215 Ute, that was for sale, and it had all these other odd things about it, and we quickly figured out this must be an Army Ute. And the first thing that struck me was the drip gutter railing over the front windscreen. But look, what I'd like to do is to talk about the differences that are in the, for instance, the FJ Army Ute, and also what the Army did to them once they were delivered to the Army. Because Holden's did some work and then the Army did some work. But more importantly, the Army actually registered these in their books, receiving and also all the way through to disposal. And these can actually be found in the military records. And I know I've done that for a few friends. But I've got 3 mates that have got a total of 4 Army Utes, and so together with Don Loeffler, Michael and Emile and Tristan have been really helpful to me in actually being able to put a little episode together on the Army Ute. So there are about, I've just counted them here, there's about 28 differences on the order for the factory to actually undertake, and then about 5 different things that the Army does. So what I'd like to talk about is the Army specification. So this is what the Army sends to the factory to get General Motors Holden to build an Army Ute. And in this case, we'll talk FJ. It would be identical for 48215 Ute as well, for the 1950 Ute. So that's fine. So what happens is procurement draws up a purchase order, and they either have a pre-agreed option number that carries these 28 standard changes, or they will actually list them. Now, I used to be procurement manager for the Queensland Electricity Commission, and in my instances there, I would have our staff, whenever we were buying a vehicle off General Motors or Ford, for instance, or anything else for that matter, clearly specify exactly what we required so that there was no confusion or misinterpretation. So, look, that being said, there was an agreed option choice for the Army, and it was FJ 2106, which was the normal designation for an FJ, and it says S, 2106S utility, and then RPO 261. So the RPO stands for Regular Production Option. So really, option 261 is all of these 28 changes before the Army actually got to them, and it was called RPO 261 No Chrome Option, because the Army didn't want chrome if they had a vehicle, really the theory behind it was at night they did not want the enemy to be able to spot their vehicle from, with reflective surfaces on it, like chrome bumper bars or grills or anything like that. Obviously, they had to have lights, and maybe the little door lock. And I've seen them with a chrome mirror as well, rather than a green mirrors. But anyway, let's start talking about that. Now, first item I've got is the exterior. Now it's saying, including parts normally chrome plated, they would be in deep bronze green, Dulux or Duco lacquer, because we're talking about nitrocellulose lacquer, Duco lacquer 253 15296 and unpolished. So they wanted it that matte look. And it's saying color combination M1 or S1, M1 or S1. So that's, instead of chrome, they wanted a deep bronze green. Now with the interior, including the instrument panel and the parts normally chrome plated, they were to be deep bronze green Duco lacquer, same as before, and unpolished. But their further specification was, in the third item, instrument panel with no provision for radio and ashtray. So they wanted that all blacked out. So there was no hole there for the speaker, there was no hole for the radio, and there was no hole for where the ashtray went through. And they were also, when they were talking about the interior, about having the steering wheel a different type of colour altogether. It was what's called dusky beige, and they're specifying a Dulux, and they're talking about inlaid enamel for the dusky beige colour, but that's got a slight metallic inlay in it, so that has some metallic fleck in the paint. So that's really important to be reminded of. And they've got two different paint numbers. So they've got 317 15478, and they're Dulux numbers. And then from September 56, so that's the last 3 months of production, it's 717 5478, 717 5478. Now the trim, they're specifying walnut in PVC. They're giving it a number of 340, and then after sometime later 537, and they're calling it copper brown PVC 610 from September 1956. So that's fine. So it's a brown interior. Now they're saying the cowl side trim reinforcements, so that's the bitumen board where your feet are. They want that in Royston brown, and they actually give the paint number for that as 253 15233, 253 15233, and they also give that for the side quarter trim in Royston brown. So that's the bitumen board that goes from the floor to your shoulder height, at the side of the seat. So that's fine. Now, that being the case, they're saying Torno floorboards and wear strips, Mundy brown synthetic enamel, they're saying 393 18163. So that's 393 18163. Now, what's being specified for the battery is not an 11-plate battery, but they're clearly stating a 13-plate battery is to replace the 11-plate battery. So that's something similar along the lines of the business sedan with all of its heavy-duty equipment. Now, what they're saying here is the special type reflex markers are to be fitted. So that is the reflectors. So you have the reflectors being fitted. Now, they are different to the standard non-military style. I have seen them in the accelerator books, but they are certainly there, as is the rear bumperettes. Now, they're saying rear bumperettes. Now, they are the military option with no overriders. So civilian had overriders and the military option did not. The other thing that was required at number 12, they call it an auxiliary folding seat for 3 people in the cargo area. So in aviation terms, they would call it a jump seat. So for instance, in the cockpit of a plane, they would have a little fold-down seat that they have, for instance, if they have an extra pilot on board who they need to return to a base, he's not part of the crew, he's just there, or they actually have an available seat that they can just fold down, and the pilot or the crew can just pop on that seat and they can sit there. They're not part of the passengers or anything like that. It's a case of that's just there in the cockpit. Well, that's called a jump seat. Now, the Army had something similar. It was just a fold-down seat that went behind the rear window in the cargo area, so that was sitting behind the bulkhead, and that was securely fastened. The fold-down part just had a very simple canvas cushion that was put on it and held down, and then just some cushion material at the back. And they're saying that was to hold 3 people. Well, they must have been 3 very skinny Army personnel, soldiers, because maybe 2 of people from the 2020s, but in the 1950s they're saying 3 people, so there must have been very, very little. However, that was the jump seat requirement in the rear of the FJ Army Ute. Now, item 13 was the roll-up canvas canopy cover, and that was specified to be supplied by an outside vendor. So I don't know whether General Motors were having a subcontractor provide that to them and it just went on the bill, or the Army actually had a specialist vendor that would make it according to Army measurements and specification and provide that to General Motors. And as a by the by, I wish my wife's late grandfather was here, because he was involved in a lot of the military procurement and would be able to certainly answer that question. So that's the roll-up canvas canopy. Now, what they also had is side metal guards. Now, they were like a metal mesh, a rectangular metal mesh. If you didn't know it, you'd think they'd be perfect for a barbecue top, actually. But having seen them, they are heavy duty, as is the number 15, the provision for the 3 36-inch tubular canopy bows. Now, they're a little bit different for the Army Ute, how the tops of their quarter panels are in the cargo area. They've got like 3 holes either side, and that's where the tubular bows actually go into. Now, number 16, they also specified the external rear vision mirror, so that was RPO, so that was option 287. So that was important to them to list that, particularly in states that required an external rear vision mirror. And they also required, number 17, tied down cleats along the quarter panels. So we'll be providing some pictures as far as the the cleats are concerned. Now with item 18, the drip moulding that goes above the windscreen, this is probably the easiest way to spot an Army Ute from the front, because it's the first thing that jumps out of you at you and you think, oh, hang on a minute, that looks really odd. And then you look at it and you think, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's actually keeping rainwater away from the windscreen and making whatever rainwater that falls on the turret run down that drip check and down the A-pillars. So, it certainly makes a lot of sense. And, I applaud them for having their vehicles with that specified, because that's a really good thing. So you certainly notice it from the front with the drip moulding above the windscreen, and it goes full length on either side. Now with the next item is 19. So they specified a fire extinguisher in bracket labelled D, up arrow D, so that's for the Department of Defence. So they wanted that labelled. And while they were labelling things, they wanted two little key tabs. So they're sort of like, I don't know, just over 1 centimetre high by probably about 2.5 centimetres long. They're like a little copper strip, and they're called RPO 30. So 310 is what their RPO number is, 310, and they've got the number stamped and or etched onto them. I've seen a couple from a friend of mine, and it just so happens that I've deleted the photo of it, so I apologise for that in advance. But they got two of those. Obviously, vehicles provided with two sets of keys, so that's why you got two key tabs. But the other thing that they wanted at item 21 was an engine oil filter, and where I have seen them mounted on a couple of different ones was on the right-hand side apron panel. That doesn't mean to say every single one was mounted there, but the ones that I have seen weren't Ryco, AC, or Fram, which are the usual ones that you associate with Holden, because they were the three accessory oil filters that you could have. The ones that I've seen sort of look to be like a bit more industrial, a bit more truck-like in their construction, but that they're sort of mounted on the right apron panel toward the front of the vehicle. Item 22 was the next thing that was specified, which is the 550 6-ply tubeless tyres. That's RPO 289. So if you'll recall, for a Ute and a panel van in the specifications, you could get a 550 or 550 or a higher 590 tyre. And so what they're actually specifying there is the lower of the two. So that's the 550, and they're saying that's option 289. Now, item 23 is something that I haven't seen, and it's talking about RPO 297, which is a chain on the fuel filler cap. So they're obviously not wanting the people who was filling the car up and using the Ute and whatever to lose a fuel filler cap on them. So they're actually specifying that there be a chain attached to it. So I think that's okay, pretty clever idea. Item 24 is they want radio suppressors fitted. That would most certainly help with the radio equipment that's actually used in the Ute. I get that. And they actually have a reverse option here at 25. It's the toolkit delete. So toolkit delete in usual circumstances. Item 26, owner's manual to be left in the glove box, the glove compartment as that's called. So that's fine. So at least they get the book. And from time, they're saying item 27, special toolkit as specified from time to time. So that doesn't necessarily mean to say it came with every car or what it was. They're saying that they would specify in particular orders what they wanted to be fitted or to be supplied with each particular car as per the order. So yeah, look, that was fine. So that was 27, and 28 is the metal logbook holder with the vinyl flap, and they wanted it cowl mounted. So what I'm saying here is, on one side, on your kick panel, you have like a metal box that your logbook holder goes into, and on the other side is where the fire extinguisher was mounted. So with logbooks, in a lot of instances, what they really want is the drivers to keep a record of who had the car, when and where and how, and when they picked it up and what the time was and who they were and where they started and what the odometer reading was and what the odometer reading was when they finished and so on. From a legality perspective, I know working for the state government here that I had to do something similar. So yeah, I get what they're talking about. Now with what happened next. Okay, so the car's manufactured. And there's normally there's a batch. Now, I'm not sure of the exact number. My friends would be able to tell me. 550 seems to jump to mind. Could be wrong, but I'll either confirm that or correct it in another Jive talking, so that's fine. But what would happen is, in normal circumstances, there is a manufacturer's ID tag that gets put on the firewall, on the passenger side of the firewall, that looks straight out. Underneath that is a weight plaque that normally tells you what the vehicle weighs, what it's capable of carrying, and any other things. But in the instance of the Army, they would have an additional firewall tag, and it would be denoting acceptance. Now, from memory, what it was giving was the date of supply, so saying when it was handed over, and they would stamp in it what the odometer reading was when they picked it up. Like, for instance, they necessarily would not. The government and the military are a little bit different to everybody else from the perspective of they don't necessarily believe everything when it's handed over. It must be tested. And so it would not be uncommon for a new car to be rolled off the truck at, I don't know, let's say Enoggera Barracks or Puckapunyal or wherever, I don't know. I'm just making it up as I go along. But the procurement person or the rep or the officer in charge of acceptance, before they would accept the vehicle, they would actually do a road test, and they might just take it for a burn into town or wherever they had to do 15 kilometres there, 15 kilometres back, to make sure that what they've been given and what they're paying for is suitable for duty. And I certainly get that, given the circumstances that these vehicles would be used in. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for there to be 20 or 30 miles on them at the point of signing the delivery note that would actually go with then the purchase order, because once the delivery note and purchase order go together, well, then the invoice will come in to the department, and then the department will pay. So that was the mechanism to pay. Now, on the bottom of that third plaque that talked about when it was actually delivered, they would also stamp in there the number of miles that were actually on the odometer at the time of handing it over. So that's just a little by the by. They don't specify the jerry can and the jerry can holder that got mounted at the rear left-hand side of the cargo area behind the left rear wheel arch. There's no documentation on it, but it's certainly there. What the Army did themselves was painted the registration number on either side of the bonnet on both sides, and also on the spare wheel door. So that's in lieu of a number plate. The tyre pressures were painted above each wheel arch, and also there was, in normal circumstances, a stencil of the speed limiting notice was painted on the dash. Now, one of the things that the factory would do is they would provide three things. They would provide two mounting points either side of the front overriders for the correct signal flags to be mounted, and also on the back of the third one would be on the back of the tail gate. And I think from memory they were all slide-in configurations. So it might be a little metal sign, and that actually was slid into those three corner pockets. So the top was unframed, but the sides and the bottom were framed, so that those little signs would go in there. So it might be, I don't know, whatever, if they were in artillery or they were in somewhere else, well, then those colours were denoted to those symbols. And I'm sure there's a technical name, and it escapes me at the moment. I'll have to look at my uncle's army records, and I'm sure that will tell me. But those cars were really terrific workhorses. They were used a lot, and so, you know, we're talking about 1950 to 1956, the FX and FJ utilities being used, and it wasn't uncommon for them to be pressed into service for 10 years. So I know another friend, his uncle lived in northern New South Wales, and he bought like 10, and every time he needed a bit of money, he bought 10 from the auction, I should say. So these were auctioned off at the end of their active life, and they were probably, I don't know, might have had 20,000 miles on them or something like that. And so that was certainly a good vehicle to get. And as a ute, you know, Australia in its developing stage during the 1960s and so on, you know, people on the land needed utes. And I remember my friend telling me that, you know, his uncle, whenever he wanted money, he would get one of the 10 green utes, and he would paint them white or whatever Holden colour was fashionable at the time, and he would just, you know, sell them, and they were painted to make them more palatable for civilian purchases, for people to buy them, not necessarily thinking and looking like, you've bought an old Army Ute and then you're driving around town in it, but you're actually, you know, you're driving a low mileage Holden Ute that's got, you know, a new paint job. So look, from that perspective, you know, also wanted to tell you that the records are still available of the purchase, and also the dispatch of the vehicles, you know, selling them at auction. You know, you can follow one in particular from its original acceptance and procurement through till when they, you know, get rid of it, to the auctions. But you know, those records still exist today. I've actually been and had a look at them. So, you know, it's terrific that